Hello, it's Sunday, it's 8 p.m, and yes, welcome to The Business. I'm Trevor Merriden with the show that's essential listening for the West Herts business community. Tonight's show could be the most important hour you have ever invested on behalf of your business, because we're going to talk about how to develop your presentation skills. We'll be giving you some very practical advice on how to use your voice, overcome your nerves, and deliver that 1-minute networking pitch to drive sales. We have interviews with Byrne of Radio 1, yes, that's right, Radio 1, Dee Clayton of Simply Amazing Training, and Ursuline Edward Sutton of Shine Personal Development. In the studio, we have our special guest, Dexter Moscow. Dexter is a really experienced broadcaster and speaker, and we're slightly in awe this evening, I think. He uses his presentation skills to deliver training to large companies and is a guest presenter on QVC. This man could sell snow to Eskimos. So how does he use his voice and delivery to do this? We're hoping to find out. So that was my 1-minute pitch for the show. I hope it was okay. Tonight, I'm joined in the studio by the Radio Verulam business team, this week in the form of Roma, Bhowmick and Clare, McAnulty. Good evening, both.
Hello, good evening.
Was that okay? Did I get the message across?
I think so. I think you got it across.
I think you did quite well there, Roma.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think you did very well. I'll give you the job.
Thank you. Okay, Roma, what have you seen in the news this week?
Well, we all love business success on this show, as evidenced by your little pitch there. So, looking for more ideas on how to best do it, I came across a piece of recent research done by Harvard Business Review, which focuses on rules for making a company truly great. Unfortunately, almost no one provides scientifically credible answers to every business leader's basic questions about superior performance, which are which companies are worth studying and what sets them apart, as well as how can we follow their examples. So, frustrated by the lack of rigorous research, Harvard Business Review undertook a statistical study of thousands of companies and eventually identified several hundred among them that have done well enough for a long enough period of time to qualify as truly exceptional. Then they discovered something startling. The many and diverse choices that made certain companies great were consistent with just 3 seemingly elementary rules, which is good. 3 rules, always like the number 3.
We like 3, that's nice and
we
simple.
Do, don't
yes.
we?
Yeah.
So what were those 3? Number 1, better before cheaper. So in other words, compete on differentiators other than price. So what makes you different to your competitors? Number 2, revenue before cost. So that is prioritise increasing revenue over reducing costs, which is an interesting one because often businesses assume they've got to cut their costs to make themselves more profitable.
Yeah.
And the third was there are no other rules. So change anything you must so that you can follow rules 1 and 2.
So there's only 2 rules.
There's only 2 rules, really.
Rules, but three rules always sounds better.
Exactly. I had you all going, which is the key thing. So how did these organisations' leaders come to adopt them? They have no idea, which is also interesting, nor do they know whether the executives even followed them consciously. Nevertheless, they appear consistent and could be used to help today's and tomorrow's leaders increase the chances that their companies too will deliver decades of exceptional performance. So there you go. 3, actually 2 very simple rules for success. We've sorted it all out, really, haven't we?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, the one in particular, the number 1, better before cheaper, makes real sense. I mean, sometimes that's easier to say than do, though, because we all kind of sometimes feel under pressure.
Sure.
Whether you're in a professional consultancy and you're talking about your day rate and people do that, but I think really you've got to be confident in what you sell.
Yeah.
And so I suppose that's saying quality before
Absolutely.
quantity,
And of course we're looking at getting the pitch right, looking at effective presentation tonight, so that's certainly got a lot to do with getting across that key differentiator, hasn't it?
Lovely pitch. Thank you, Roma.
A little segue in there.
Okay, Claire.
So rather closer to home for my news story. This concerns 38 fine arts students from the University of Hertfordshire who are holding their degree show in July of this year. So it's become a tradition for the students to exhibit at the Truman Brewery, which is in Brick Lane in London.
I've been there.
Have you been to it?
I've been back.
This annual event allows the graduates to exhibit on an international level and hopefully get their work seen by as wide a range of people as possible.
Yeah.
However, staging the event doesn't come cheap, and they needed £6,500. So cash-strapped students, what do? They decide to try and raise a sum of money. However, I have to say full marks to them all. They had a combination of cake sales, face painting, pub quizzes, and they finished it off with a successful £2,000 Kickstarter campaign and then reached their target 4 weeks ago.
Wow.
Now, was it not only last month that we were hearing about the rise in the number of young entrepreneurs, but I just thought to myself, what a great combination of artistic talent and business flair, an unbeatable combination surely. So
Absolutely.
just to say well done to them all, and let's hope they all have a highly successful show.
I think this is a wonderful story because, you know, we so often, you know, I find myself, you know, I'm sort of in middle age, some would say well into middle age, you know, actually, you know, finding myself starting sentences like in my day this happened, or young people these days. But actually, young people these days I think are fantastic.
Absolutely.
You know, because they are better at solving problems. You know, they're incredible in terms of what they actually do. And I think there was a survey recently that said that UK children in particular are brilliant problem solvers compared with a lot of their international peers. So I know this isn't just about problem solving, but it's the ingenuity and the energy of young folk.
Well, problem solving's got a lot to do with business success, hasn't it? Because you've got to be on the ball, you've got to be able to react quickly to changes. So I think, as you say, hats off to them.
Absolutely, fantastic.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've got a story which is a sort of a bit of a weird one. It was ever thus. An algorithm has been appointed as a board director.
An algorithm?
An algorithm, yes, not algorithm. But a programme called Vital will actually have a vote on the board on whether to invest in a specific company or not. The firm it will be working for, called Deep Knowledge Ventures, focuses on drugs for age-related diseases. Now, this is a bit of PR hype, to be honest, because we all use, I mean, in financial markets it's been going on for years, people using a lot of programs and complicated algorithms, so on, to actually make decisions about trades and buys and sells. But leaving aside the sort of the gimmick side of things, I mean, having an algorithm having a place on the board, you know, not only relates me to think about its executive pay and and its remuneration, whether it's a fat cat algorithm or not, but generally, the one thing that's a problem about this is also about the mentality of the crowd, if you like. You know, algorithms tend to follow sort of safe patterns in making decisions, and actually, you know, you've got your Dysons, your kind of wild entrepreneurs who kind of, you know, didn't listen to what everybody else was saying and actually made their millions. And I think it's a very fine balance you need to strike between actually using all the data and actually becoming a slave to the data, and actually not, you know, thinking for yourself. I don't know what you guys think.
It's like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Do you remember Hal? He started thinking for himself. It could get quite scary if this algorithm decided to think for itself.
Yes.
Claire's looking at me as if I'm mad.
Now, we know that you listeners, you all like to think for yourself, don't you? And we want to hear your views. So do get in contact. Our studio number is 01727 839 926. Our Twitter feed, as always, is @RV the Business. And we're going to be back after this short break.
If you want to know what's going on in St Albans and West Herts, then join Telegraph journalist Louisa Peacock as she debates the local current affairs and news of the week with live guests every Tuesday from 7 p.m. right here on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam. Tweet along with the show @RV Outspoken or @Louisa Peacock. Outspoken, Radio Verulam's local news and current affairs show with Louisa Peacock. Tuesdays 7 p.m. right here on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam.
Has your child outgrown day nursery? Would you like them to attend a more structured environment with a wide range of interesting and challenging activities?
I like cooking stuff with Mrs. Federici.
Mount Carmel Kindergarten in Sandpit Lane is now offering extended sessions, so even if you work, your child can enjoy an outstanding environment that prepares them for school and is somewhere they will want to go to every day.
I like playing games. I love my teachers.
For more, see our website at mountcarmelkindergarten.co.uk. Mount Carmel Kindergarten, private education for little people.
Mount Carmel Kindergarten.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Yes, welcome back to The Business. It's 13 minutes past the hour. Absolutely delighted to have in the studio Dexter Moscow, a man who needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. So over to you, Clare.
Okay, well, very, very nice to see you, Dexter, and you're our very first guest in our new temporary studio. So you have that honour as well. So why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and about your work in presenting both in person and on television?
With pleasure. First of all, I always say this. My name is Dexter Moscow, and it is my real name, not my stage name. So people often think, it's a made-up name, but it isn't. It isn't. And it actually has been very useful for my television and also radio career. I started in hospital radio, would you believe? Okay. And so understood a lot about how to communicate with people, and then took that. A friend actually approached me and said, Dex, would you like to do a slot for me on QVC? And just to show you how long ago it was, he said, would you sell some video recorders for me? So I said, yeah, sure. What's QVC? And so he explained that this was a shopping channel, and this was in the early days of the shopping channel. I think it had been going for a couple of years. But knowing that I had always done presentation work with companies and advised people on how to communicate, I started on QVC. And what evolved after a number of years, I became their chief trainer. But not of the presenters, of the guest presenters. So these were people that had never presented, let alone present on television. So I helped them construct the kind of sell that would create instant impact, because that's what we need to do on television, and have of late taken those ideas over the last 10 years, working with individuals within companies, within sales teams, to use those same ethos, if you like, that same ethos of how to present to an invisible audience, to how to present and to pitch and to engage and enroll people out there in the corporate world.
Now, you're talking about QVC, and obviously this is a business programme. Do you think it's simply enough for a business to be good at whatever it is they're selling?
One of my, I suppose, soapbox statements is that today it isn't enough to be technically brilliant at what we do. We have to be master influencers. And I say it like that rather than master salespeople, because, as we discussed actually a little bit earlier, people do not like being sold to. And so we have to find, I was going to say more subtle ways. I think it is actually more engaging ways, more ways that people gain some real benefit from what we discuss with them, so that they see the advantage, and then actually sometimes, regardless of price and regardless of how large our company is, to say, this is the person I need to work with. So yes, it isn't now about technical skills, it's about the ability to be able to connect with people.
Now, one of you've got a very distinctive voice, and earlier on we interviewed someone called Byrne, but I'll let Roma introduce.
Yes, well, Dominic Byrne, or Dom Byrne, is a Radio 1 newsreader. He also trains new broadcasters in using their voices effectively. Vicky spoke to him earlier this week and started by asking Dom how he came to be so interested in the subject of voice.
So I started in radio about 20 years ago or so. In Radio 1 terms, which is where I've sort of done most of my work, I was told by my boss to start voice training the newer recruits into Radio 1. And within 6 months or so, I found it really rewarding. I was suddenly bringing people in who had previously no experience of being on air. Between me and you, had pretty awful voices, actually, and giving them some techniques to improve their kind of on-air manner. And then I just found myself... it was like I was addicted to doing it. I just absolutely loved it, and I've done it for the last sort of 10 or 12 years, and essentially, the ethos behind it is to get people to, whether they're in radio or television or whatever, is just to be as natural and conversational as possible, because radio has changed a lot in the last 20 years. It's not full of very posh people speaking in home counties accents anymore. Anything goes. And back in the day, it was only radio or TV people who were broadcasting, and now everybody's doing it. Whether you're on Facebook or Twitvids or YouTube, everybody in some capacity is broadcasting, and people just want to hear people being as natural as possible, and that's what they really respond to.
So what is important about the voice in presenting? What can go wrong in terms of the way that you use your voice, and what can go right?
The most common mistake I think that people make is they assume that people are interested in what they're saying per se, and regardless of the content, so they feel they don't have to sell that at all, they just talk. What happens usually is it manifests itself with people being very monotonous, so you just talk in a way that doesn't have any emphasis, any changes of tone whatsoever, and before you know it, you've actually just switched off.
Nodded off.
Exactly right, because there's nothing to engage you, and I don't have the science to back this up, but it's just an instinct that the human ear just loves to hear changes of tone. It's a kind of clue, it's a nudge in the ribs to say we've moved on to a different subject, or this bit is more interesting than this bit, or whatever. And I draw this very, very basic diagram that my 4-year-old daughter could draw, which is essentially just a series of waves, because that's how we talk. If we're, sat in a restaurant, our voices are going to go up and they're going to go down. It shouldn't be any different to when you're on the radio. And as soon as you disrupt that pattern in any way, it sounds wrong, and people tend to tune out. When you are doing it, when you are changing tone, and when you're changing emphasis within whatever it is you're saying, and it could be, from my background, a news story, or it could just be you having a chat with your friends in a pub, or whatever. There is a reason why you're telling that story, and there is a reason why certain words are more important than the other words. Your job, as the person who's telling that story, is to pull out the important bits from that, and then you create this lovely sort of up and down wave. And when it goes wrong, it sounds horrendous.
So, how is it easy to teach people to use their voice better?
It very much depends on the person you're teaching, but essentially it's the same techniques that apply to anybody. It could be a CEO of a big company, it could be a trainee journalist. You're essentially getting them to understand the importance of being natural, conversational and fluent, and understanding what makes a good voice and what makes a pretty boring voice as well. Once they've grasped that, it's very, very easy, and then you're essentially just honing in on techniques. I'll spend 3 hours voice training somebody, and all we're trying to do is mimic natural speech. That's it, which sounds like the easiest thing in the world, and it's not. So you need that toolkit of technique to get you to a stage 3 hours later where you sound as though you're just talking.
But it's a well-trained talk by that stage.
It is, and it's a natural, and you can hear subconsciously, you can pick up when somebody isn't being themselves.
Yeah.
It manifests itself in so many different ways.
And that toolbox that you've shared with your clients, is it easy for them to then use that toolbox as they carry on developing their voice qualities? I
think so, and the easiest way, and what I always say to people as well is, firstly, everybody hates the sound of their own voice, unless they're an egomaniac like me, who's worked on Radio 1 for however many years. But generally speaking, people don't like to listen to their own voice. But if you are wanting to engage an audience in whatever aspect, it could be a one-to-one or a couple of hundred people, you need to listen to your voice, and you need to know why. Yes, I did sound good then, or no, I didn't sound good then, and work out why, and work very quickly to try and eradicate all the bad bits and work on the good bits. If you hear somebody who speaks in a way that you find interesting, it's probably just because they are emphasising words they should be, and they are changing tone all the way through. So it's something to keep you sort of interested. You've just got to lean in when you listen as opposed to switch off.
But are there some people that just shouldn't be on radio, for example?
No, but that's not true of 20 years ago, when an awful lot of people who could have been on radio weren't, because they had regional accents. So it's very different, luckily for me, in radio now than it was sort of however many years ago, that people just want to hear real voices in whatever form. And as long as you've got the techniques in place, you can have a naturally quite a nice voice, or naturally not quite, not such a nice voice. But as long as the techniques are there, you can make them the best of everyone. And I genuinely will say, hand on heart, I haven't had a situation where I haven't been able to voice train somebody.
Don, how do people get in touch with you if they need to, if they'd like to get some of your training? Is it easiest just to follow you on Twitter? And then
it is. I mean, unfortunately, when we were on the Chris Moyle show on Radio 1, Twitter was a fairly new thing. So in a split second, I came up with Dom is a twit, which is my Twitter, thinking it would just disappear, it would be a new fad, and it's gone within a year. But unfortunately, that was about 10 years ago, and it's stuck. So yeah, Dom is a twit is my Twitter name. And so yes, if you want some voice training, then at Dom is a twit is probably as good a place to go as any.
You know that bit where Vicky Scott was talking about are there some people who shouldn't be on radio?
Who was she thinking?
I don't know. I've started to feel a bit paranoid about that, actually.
I don't.
Anyway, so go on, Claire.
So Dexter, Dom was speaking there about real voices. This is what people want to hear. I mean, would you agree with that? So somebody selling, for example, on QVC, if you could just get them to the phrase be themselves, do you think that helps sell a product?
I think that is absolutely key. Authenticity is essential, because we can be trained to have a modulated tone to our voice, but unless we really believe in what we are saying, we're passionate about what we're saying. Because I think that there is an overarching rule in business, and that says people buy people first. And so if people don't buy into us when we are talking and getting excited and getting passionate about what we're talking about, then we don't even start with them. So I think that if we are excited, then there's a natural modulation. For me, and I have to admit this, I didn't spring forth being a television presenter or radio presenter. I was an estate agent. And at this point, most of your listeners may have turned off. And I must admit, I hated being an estate agent. I loved being able to match people with homes. That was the thing. But many years after I got out of a state agency, I decided that I wanted to do something with my voice. Excuse me. And learnt a little bit about how to present. And so I became a television extra, a film extra. And when everybody else was off drinking or eating or whatever, I stayed on set and listened to the likes of Kenneth Branagh, Kate Winslet, Derek Jacobi, how they use their voice to make what I think is essential in any business or presentation situation, create an emotional connection with their audience. And I think that when you are authentic, and when you are really, again, and I make no apologies for repeating it, when you are passionate about what you do, then it comes out in the voice. So if you do have a monotone voice, let your friends be honest with you. And to that point about, we hate the sound of our own voices, I hate that. I can't listen to my own voice. And actually, when we do hear our own voices back, we hear it at a different frequency. Trevor, you'd know more about this than I would, but the frequency that we hear our voice is different from other people. Yeah. But if your friends and your family are saying you have a monotone voice, you've got to do something about it, then listen to other people, listen to radio, television presenters who you have this connection with, and don't copy them, but take from them what you think you would like to sound like. Yeah. And that's how to train yourself. I mean,
the thing that Dom said that's reassuring is that really anyone can be trained to use the voice. It doesn't matter what your accent is in my case, or it doesn't matter as long as you speak clearly and interesting. As you say, you're authentic and you sound interested. So that's very good news for us business people.
Yeah.
I'm quite interested though to join to make a parallel between you selling on QVC, which after all is an invisible audience, isn't it?
Yes.
To the likes of businesses selling online, which again we have our websites, but in a sense we're selling to invisible audiences. We don't know who we're selling to. So how do you? Are there any tips that you can give us for selling to an invisible audience?
Yes, absolutely. And often when I conduct seminars, and the first questions that I ask after I've introduced myself and say that as a QVC guest presenter, I do sell to an invisible invisible audience. And I ask the question, do you sell to an invisible audience? And I ask for a show of hands. And there's 2 or 3 hands go up because they know what I'm going to ask them next. And I say, okay, well, how many of you have, let me ask this in a different way, how many of you have a website? How many of you communicate by email? How many of you communicate over the phone? And then I say, let me tell you something that might upset you. You are selling to an invisible audience. So the key in that situation, in the business situation, certainly in a QVC situation, is that seek, and I don't know if I said, but I'm a Dale Carnegie trained coach. And one of the principles of Dale Carnegie, and it's based on 30 human relationship principles, is try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. And so to be really a connector and an emotional connector with an audience, be it one or many or round a boardroom table, try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view. Find out what that person needs. And that's true of networking situations as well. Don't go in there pitching your wares. Find out what people really want. If you're going to make your 1-minute pitch, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, or whether you have got the advantage, and this is what I really recommend, if you're going to networking situations, grab some time, not just your 1 minute, but your 15 minutes at the front of the room. And then the way to present there is to try honestly to see what their needs are. In fact, more than their needs, what their pains are, what they're suffering on a daily basis that you may be able to help them with.
Dexter, I couldn't agree with you more, particularly around what you said about Dale Carnegie. I mean, these are books that were written a long time ago.
1912.
Now. And I've got them all at home. I know a lot of people have still got them.
Yes.
And they're timeless.
Yes.
They're absolutely timeless. And it comes back to, no matter how much the world changes, there are certain philosophies and principles that don't change. So,
yes.
As you said, it's all about the other person's shoes. And
it must be. And that's the key. When I work with people who are presenting, either on QVC, or less so now, but certainly in the corporate environment, I'll say, what are the situations that those people find themselves in? Because don't tell me what you do. Tell me what you do for others. Which is what we're all
guilty of doing that sometimes, aren't we, rather than,
Yeah. I think what's very interesting is that we constantly need to be reminded. As you just pointed out, Dexter, Dale Carnegie have been around, or rather the Dale Carnegie methods have been around for some time, and yet we're still having the conversations about how to be effective at presenting. And it's interesting that we need to be reminded the whole time.
And in fact, after the next break, we'll move on to the actual pitch.
Join me weekdays from 4 till 7 p.m. for West Hart's Drive Time, with features including Chris's Film Club, Pound Saver, Community Notice Board, Calendar Artist, Hot Topics and many more besides. We also feature correspondents covering topics such as lifestyle, consumer advice, cooking, interior design and travel. We have regular interviews, local news and sports, celebrity birthdays, travel and traffic updates and competitions as well. That's all on West Hart's Drive Time with me, Danny Smith, on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
The Abbey Line connects St Albans Abbey train station at the bottom of Holywell Hill with Watford Junction and was one of the UK's first official community railways.
The community rail concept was designed to help create a more sustainable future, to reduce the cost of running the line without compromising safety or service, and to involve local people more closely in the development of their railway.
For 150 years, the Abbey Line has been taking people between St Albans and the centre of Watford and beyond.
It continues to do this, and all for at most £6.60 return, and in only 16 minutes.
For more information, visit their website, which is abbeyline.org.uk.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to the business. It's just gone hour, and I'm here in the studio with Roma, Bhowmick and Clare, McAnulty, and also our very special guest, Dexter Moscow. For those just tuning in, tonight's programme is focusing on developing your presentation skills, and if attending networking meetings helps you get business, then one thing you'll have to be able to master is the 1-minute networking pitch. Even the most timid business person has to be able to speak in public from time to time in order to promote themselves, and for many of us, the thought of speaking in public fills us with absolute dread. So what can we actually do about it, and how can we get better? Dee Clayton runs Simply Amazing Training. Her company helps people improve their presentation skills, and Dee has a 4-step process, not a 3-step process or a 2-step process, but a 4-step process for helping her clients deliver their 1-minute pitch effectively. So our very own Clare McAnulty started by asking Dee about the 4 steps.
They're not all equally balanced in terms of time, but they are equally important. And the 4 steps that I use are time, number, journey and question. And what I like to do when I'm training is give people a visual to attach to those so that they can just remember it, because whilst we like to think we're going to have, half an hour to prepare our pitch every week or every month, it kind of doesn't happen that way, and it often happens, if it happens at all, in the car on the way to the networking group. So if you can also attach a visual to those 4 steps, it really helps you if you need it last minute as well. For time, I get people to picture a clock face. For number, I get them to picture a hashtag. And for journey, I get them to picture A to B, just the letters A to B. Mm-hmm. And then obviously a question mark for the last one.
So we've got the clock to begin with, the time. So what's important about the time?
So it's just a way to start off that establishes credibility immediately. So if I say, hi, my name's Dee Clayton, and I've been speaking in public for over 21 years, that in one sentence has suggested that I've got credibility, I know what I'm doing, you can trust me, I've survived the recessions, that sort of thing. So it gives you credibility in what you're doing.
And the second one, which is the visual, is the hashtag, and that's the number. So what do we do with that?
Well, I like to call this the sexy number. So this is really to get people's attention. It might be that I helped a client the other week win over £5,000 worth of business. And that would get people's attention, because if you think, a lot of these networking groups are in the morning, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
There's 40, 30 people in the room, and you haven't as much as you should listen to everybody. Not everybody does. So you really want to kind of grab people's attention, and the number helps you to do that.
Our next one is the journey. So we journey from A to B.
Yes, and this is really the main content of your pitch. The other 2 have a purpose. The time was to establish credibility, and the number is to, hey, go, listen to me, this is going to be a great pitch. I can help you, earn an extra £4,500 or whatever your number was. This is really where you bring in emotion and the story. And you want to tell a story all the way through. So for the £4,500 that I mentioned earlier, I need to tell that story. So before, I worked with Lisa. She was unable to win new business because she was so nervous about talking to new prospective customers. And then you say about how good it is afterwards. So since working with me, Lisa's been able to gain much more business. Just one example of the client she won last week, which was worth £4,500. She felt confident, but also she knows she can go and do that in the future as well. So Lisa's now a really happy working mum who, really enjoys her business and can make profit from it too.
The final one is your question mark is the visual. So a call to action at the end then. How do you do that?
Absolutely. So if you're in an official networking group where it's okay to be blunt about it, something, for example, BNI, they want you to ask a question at the end, then I would say, who do you know who's a working mum who really wants to make her business profitable? So you've got the same theme going down through the story. This woman Lisa and the money, and then asking for Lisa's. If what most people do at the end is ask for anybody, and I then get my foam banana out. I don't know if you know that I love little monkeys. I talk about public speaking monkeys.
I've heard of the public speaking monkeys, yeah.
So I get my little foam banana out and wave it at people whose question at the end is, who knows anybody who needs presentation skills? Because if I ask that question, that's asking you to think really hard for me about whether you know anyone who needs presentation skills, which is quite a tricky question. Whereas if I say, who do you know who's a working mum who wants to make profit out of their business? that's really easy for you to think of someone, isn't it? Or at least start thinking, putting an effort in to think.
Do you run classes showing people how to do this, with the 1 minute pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. I do webinars on it, so if anyone's interested, they can get in touch for that. And I do sort of kind of in-house ones, so companies do half days with me. So in a half day, there can be 6 to 10 people who have actually totally nailed their 1 minute pitch.
And do you want to just give us your website, Dee, so that people can contact you?
Yes, it's www.dclayton.com.
And that was Dee Clayton. Dee's provided a PDF covering all of this, and you can find the link for downloading it on our YouTube channel, RV The Business. Now, Dexter, Dee mentioned the telling of a story in order to show the benefits of a business, and I know that you also use stories to sell products on QVC. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think that is one of the key things in any conversation where you can draw a picture that somebody can step into so that they experience what the client or you have done. Again, that phrase, don't tell us what you do, but tell us what you've done for others. Then that is a story-led conversation. If I can give you an example of something that I do on QVC, and if I may after that, I'll give you my framework. Dee's framework is excellent. I really like that. And those touch points are certainly I totally agree with. And to illustrate that, I was selling an umbrella on QVC. Not very sexy product, but very useful, because this is a dual-skinned umbrella. It doesn't turn inside out. And the way that I was talking about it was to say, have you ever been in a situation where, the weather is, you get up in the morning, the weather's nice, and you say, shall I take an umbrella? Shall I not take an umbrella? No, I'm not going to. And you get off the bus or you get out the tube and it's chucking it down. And so you go to a local stand and it's one of those umbrellas the cheapy umbrellas that you buy, and the wind blows and the umbrella turns inside out, and then it's useless. You try and push it back, the spines break, and you have to chuck it away. Well, with this particular umbrella, you don't have to worry, because it isn't going to let you down. It's not going to turn inside out, and you'll get to your appointment, your hair will be dry, you will feel relaxed, and perhaps you'll even do the business. So what I've done there is I've told a story that actually is based on pain. It's identifying a situation where somebody has had an experience. In fact, most of us have had that experience at some time. So by telling the story, you are engaging with something that they can relate to. And then you give them the solution of how this will solve that kind of problem. And so it's pain-based, it's relevant to a person's experience, and it gives them a solution to that particular problem. So if I can just reinforce that by giving you the framework that I use, I call it the 4 cornerstones of presentation.
Right.
And you'll hear the similarity with Dee. The first thing is about personal credibility. If we can touch what we do and how we've done it, then that is our personal credibility. The second is company credibility, and that may be how long our company has been in being, or it may be the companies that we work with. So you very kindly gave me some credibility by saying that I work with QVC, which is a well-known company. So that's the tie-up by both personal and company credibility. Then, of course, we've got to say what either the product does or what we do, but translating it to what their expectations are. And the fourth element is the WIFM, which sounds like a radio station, but it's what's in it for me.
There's the Women's Institute FM.
So that's those 4 elements: the personal credibility, the company credibility, what it actually does and what the product does or the service does, but what does that mean to them? And what actually does it mean to me? Why am I passionate about doing that? So that translates into a minute to win it, which is what we hear with these networking situations, and actually it can be also attributed to a much longer and much wider conversation. And just to think that through, if you're invited to a networking situation, wherever you have to perhaps give a minute discussion, or you're invited to give a 10-minute discussion, grab it with both hands, because we're all of us very time poor, which means that if we spend our time giving 1-minute presentations and then trying to connect with other people in that room, get to the front of the room and connect with more people in one go.
Right.
Can I ask a question, Dexter?
Yeah.
Do you think 1 minute is enough to get your message across?
No. All it can do is pique interest. And so one of the techniques that we can do, and you did it this evening, you came on air and told us 2 business-related stories.
On the back, Trevor.
Absolutely.
I'm relieved.
So even if you're not going to tell people what you do in that 1 minute, use a prop. Use a newspaper headline. Use a story that has relevance to them, that they think, do you know what? I don't know what they said, because if you get a room of people, you're never going to remember what everybody does. But if they say, do you know, I like their attitude. I'm not sure what they said, but I must meet with them afterwards. That's the key to it.
I mean, the point you're making there is that, I mean, no matter how attentive people are, to what you're saying, and certainly they'll be more attentive if you're telling the story, they don't actually remember a lot of what you say, even if you're hugely interesting in what you do.
So in some cases, and I've done this on occasions when there's only a 1 minute, I tell a story, perhaps even a joke, that gets people laughing, but it has to be relevant to their circumstance. So it has to resonate with them. And when that does that, they remember you and they come over and say, can I have a chat with you? Let's have a coffee. That's
Can I ask a slightly cheeky question?
Yeah.
What do you think is the most difficult thing you've had to sell, and how have you managed to sell it? Can you think of some sort of really sort of strange product that you had to sell?
Yes. This is going to blow my street cred completely, but on QVC for many years I was known as Mr. Christmas.
Right.
And by definition that meant at some point I was selling toot. And there was one particular product, and I won't use the language that a friend left for me on an answer phone, but when I came off there at midnight, I was selling, and I apologise for this, I was selling an angel, a fibre optic angel with detachable wings. And the message he left for me was, if an angel has detachable wings, how the can it fly? I think that was the most difficult.
That was the most difficult, but you still managed.
I managed it, and I tell you how I managed it. Was it something I wanted in my home? No. Were there people out there that I thought would appreciate it, who believe in angels, who have guardian angels? That's how I sold it.
I bought it.
Roma was your customer.
So sorry.
Yes, I was the customer. It's on my tree
Roma,
every
I'm
Christmas.
sorry.
and on that bombshell, we'll take a break.
Hi, I'm Kathy Weston.
And I'm Lydia El-Khoury.
Join us every Thursday evening on The Parent Show for expert interviews, local information about caring for children in West Hearts,
and a What's On guide you just can't afford to miss. We're here every Thursday between 8 and 9 p.m. on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
Don't forget to tune in!
Looking for something fun to do? Or fancy taking up a new hobby? Join me, Ellie O'Fara, and my lovely guests as we'll explore the very best activities on offer and things to do in our local area. This Friday from midday on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
Whether you need cat advice, want to adopt a rescue cat, or have time on your hands to help with volunteering, St Albans and District Catch Protection would like to hear from you. For more details, contact St Albans and District Catch Protection on 0845 371 2064 or visit the website www.stalbans.cats.org.uk.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
People living with cancer or life-threatening illness can often feel isolated, confused and alone. Grove House in Waverley Road, St Albans, leads the way in offering free specialist care and support to patients and their families affected by cancer and life-threatening illness in St Albans, Harpenden and Dacorum. To find out more about their services, or how you can become a volunteer, or make a regular donation, or leave a gift in your will, phone 01727 731 000 or visit grove-house.org.uk.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
And welcome back. So, all this talk of presenting is all very well, but what do we do about nerves? Of course, I never get nervous, do I? It's difficult to give a convincing talk when your voice is faltering and your hands are shaking. Trevor spoke earlier to Ursuline Edwards-Sutton of Shine Personal Development and asked Ursuline just why people feel so nervous when giving a presentation.
The real reason generally that people feel nervous is they're afraid of what might happen. And let's just examine that in more detail. So what is the worst that can happen? And when you ask people, that they'll give you all of their fears. So they may stumble over their words, slightly embarrassing. They may completely freeze and forget their words. If it's sort of flight or fight syndrome, that can happen. They may observe that people aren't very interested in what they say, and there are certain things you can do to combat that in terms of knowing your audience and pitching your presentation for different learning styles in the audience. And I guess the last thing is that they fear therefore that it hasn't gone very well and that they may be embarrassed. And I think the takeout from all of that is that there are lots of things you can do in preparation and to manage nerves, which I'm sure we're going to cover. But if you look at presenting as an opportunity and say at the end of that, if it didn't go quite as well as I thought, what have I learned? So use it as feedback and use it as an opportunity to improve your presentation skills and do better next time.
Many people say, and up to a point I would guess this is true, that preparation often gets rid of some nerves. On the other hand, you often come across people who are a little bit over-prepared in the way they present because they become so concerned about what they are going to say that they then start to go into a sort of monotonic patter. How do you encourage people to prepare but not to over-prepare?
If you've done the right preparation and you know your subject really well, your passion will come across if it's your topic and you've prepared it well. In terms of over-preparation, that is when somebody has just learnt it by rote and they're just going to parrot from phrase to phrase, and if somebody interrupts, and that's quite often when you're making a presentation, then they lose their track. But there are little techniques to pull them back on course.
So what are the physical things that you can do to actually combat or at least ease nerves?
Okay, so there are really two main things. One is very simple, but it requires you to do it and a little practice, which is actually breathing. So I advise everybody to find some personal space before a presentation. So, do not arrive 5 minutes before, try and set up your PC and be worrying about the technology. So have everything set up, and if you're presenting to a big audience, make sure they've got your presentation in advance so that that's all done for you. Then take yourself off and practice some deep breathing techniques, because deep breathing will actually slow down your heart rate and you will start to feel a lot calmer. It sounds a little bit crazy, but trust me, it works. The breathing is an imperative. The other thing in terms of physical attributes is a technique technique, a visualisation technique, which I use through my NLP training. We know that successful athletes actually have to believe that they can win gold. Yes. You know, that they are capable of that. And those kinds of visualisation techniques can be taught to people so that they can actually visualise themselves performing and doing a great, and I say performing, but it really is doing a great performance and getting the reaction from the audience that they want.
So that was Ursuline giving us her tips on avoiding those terrible nerves. We should say Ursuline's website is all the W's, shinepersonneldevelopment.co.uk, and her email is info@shinetoday.co.uk if you'd like more information from her. So any tips for dealing with nerves then, Dexter?
Yeah, I have. I think that two of the points that Ursuline mentioned, I would certainly agree with, about the breathing and just relaxing yourself down, taking some time to do that. But visualization, again, hands up and admission, I get nervous every time I present, whether it be on air, in front of a television camera, or in fact in front of an audience. And the way that I do it, I do meditate, and I'm not saying this is transcendental meditation, but this is just breathing and relaxing the body down. And then I use this visualization technique that she talked about. And what I do is I see myself standing and opening the discussion, the comment, the presentation. And for me, that's the key point. If you can visualize how you are going to open the presentation, most times people know what they want to say. I help a lot of people order that middle bit of the actual content, but the structure is important as well. So know how you're going to start, and it can be a compliment, it can be a statistic, it can be certainly a story that introduces what you're going to talk about, and visualize yourself standing up, smiling, people in the audience nodding their heads in approval. You don't have to run the whole presentation through, but you have to run it through to the end where you see people that perhaps a standing ovation, certainly laughing, clapping, even coming up to you afterwards, shaking your hands and say, you know, that was a fantastic presentation. Let's have a chat because I think I can do business with you. So those true elements of visualization is where I see it. And then, if you like, the structure, once again, to give you is know how you're going to start, order the content, practice the content, and then think of the way that you're going to finish. How are you going to start and how are you going to finish? The middle bit kind of takes care of itself. And this thing about freezing and of, you know, losing your words, losing your train of thought.
Which is what most of us are afraid of, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm doing it, I feel like I'm walking along a tightrope.
Yes.
And I might wake up at any moment, or I've wandered off, you know, on some sort of terrible tangent, and then I think, where was I?
Yeah.
And that's the moment where I feel like I might fall off.
Okay, so the first thing I would do is correct that mental image of walking on a tightrope. I would see it as walking on solid ground, and people, again, nodding their heads, and you're offering sage advice, and that's one of the keys of presentation. Don't tell people just what you do. Again, that emphasis, but give them examples of how you have assisted, but also engage with them, enlighten them, tell them something that they don't know, because that's what people go to seminars and talks to. So when you come to that point on that solid surface where you don't know where you're going next, as I said, there's two devices. Either you put your hands together, and it's almost like you're praying, which you are, but
doing a lot of that.
When you take just absolutely, and you take just a couple of moments and you eyeball the audience, you sweep the audience with your eyes. It looks like not that you've forgotten your way and you're asking for help, but actually there's something sage advice. The divine intervention is going to drop pearls of wisdom from your mouth. Yeah. The other thing is, this thing about don't use your notes. Often, I've coached people, and it happened myself, where I lose my way. And what I do is I pick up my notes and say, I just want to make sure that I haven't missed out anything that would really be important, because I really want you to get the benefit of what I think is valuable. And then what you're doing is actually thinking, thank God I've got myself back on it. But that's a couple of devices. The one is the silent one, where you take a little bit of time and people think, he's really thinking this through. Or when you grab your notes and say, I really want to make sure I haven't missed out anything for you.
Okay. And as you say, if you can get a good start and you get a good finish, you can go a little bit wobbly in the middle.
Yes.
People tend to be quite forgiving of that, don't they? If you start well and you finish well. And as you say, you've now got those 2 devices that you can use.
If you lose your way.
If you lose your way. And I like the notes as well. That's a very good tip.
If I can, because I'm very process driven, and if I can do 2 things here, can I give you what I call the 4 E's, which are my touch points, apart from the 4 cornerstones. These is, if you like, this is the framework for a presentation. And the key, first of all, is to engage. So that's how you start. And we know you've only got 30 seconds to do that. The second is to enlighten. And there are 3 elements of enlightenment. Tell them what they already know, so you're giving them confirmation. Tell them something that they don't know, that they will find benefit. And the third actually is the key. It's called FOMO. Any of you heard FOMO?
FOMO, no.
Fear of missing out. You're telling them what other people are doing that they're not doing, that they should be doing. So that's the enlightenment bit. Excite people. It is a presentation. A wise man once said that selling is a Broadway play performed by psychiatrists. So we have to be very, very aware of the psychology of that. So we need to excite people. There's an audience. People expect to be excited. And that comes through the passion, which we've talked about. And the last bit is actually to entertain. People want to be entertained. And so there are pattern interrupts or attention reset buttons that if we're giving a long presentation, every 4 to 7 minutes, we need to do something different to re-engage.
Okay, so we've got engage, enlighten, excite and entertain.
Yes.
And can you just, if people want to get in touch with you, Dexter, can you maybe give us your website address or some way they can get hold of you?
There are 2, because I'd also like to offer a free downloadable ebook. My own personal website is www.audience-dynamics.co.uk. And by definition, audience dynamics means we're thinking much more about what the audience wants rather than the message we convey. The other one, which is the downloadable ebook, is www.persuasivepresentations.biz.
That's absolutely wonderful, and people should have a FOMO about those things for you. I've learned so much tonight, and I know, and just by the sort of nodding heads from Clare and Roma, I know they have us too. Well, we hope you've enjoyed listening to this edition of The Business, the show that's essential listening for West Hart's business community. Thank you to our studio guest, Dexter Moscow. Also, thank you to Don Byrne from Radio 1, Dee Clayton from Simply Amazing Training, and Ursuline Edwards-Sutton from Shine Personal Development. So from Roma and Clare, and also Vicky Scott, who did some of the interviews tonight, then thank you and good night, and be sure to tune in next time.
You've been listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.